My wife cheated on me with my best friend, and then I found out she was secretly plotting to steal our $500, $0 inheritance and my family's estate. Now she's suing me for emotional distress over the property I refused to give her during the divorce. I never thought I'd be the guy writing this kind of story, but here I am. It all started when I noticed something was off with Lisa, my wife. At first, I just chalked it up to stress. She's always been a little bitchy when she's overwhelmed. But then little things started piling up. She became more secretive about her phone, hiding texts and locking her social media. She'd leave her phone around, then quickly grab it if I looked her way. I caught her deleting messages more than once. That's when I started paying closer attention. One afternoon, I decided to check her phone when she was in the shower. I know, probably not the most noble move, but I was desperate for answers. I found a series of texts between her and someone named Jake. At first, I thought it was just a friendly conversation, but then I saw the way she was talking, flirty, suggestive. Like she was trying to hide something. The messages mentioned meeting up and there were references to us having fun. My stomach sank. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I loved and trusted, was cheating on me with my best friend Jake. I knew they'd been close, but I never imagined it went this far. The worst part. I remembered the times Lisa had blown me off, saying she was busy with work or tired. But now I saw the truth. They'd been sneaking around behind my back for months. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. How could she do this to me, to us? I started digging deeper, looking through her emails and social media. That's when I found out she wasn't just cheating, she was also plotting. She started talking about taking our inheritance, a $500, $0 estate my family had left me, and using it to fund her new life. She told Jake she wanted to get rid of me, that I was holding her back, and that once she had enough money she'd leave me for good. It was like a whole conspiracy. She'd been planning her escape for months, and I was just some obstacle she wanted to get rid of. The night I confronted her was a whirlwind. I found her in the living room, scrolling through her phone, looking smug. I showed her the messages. Her reaction, she lied, of course, said I was paranoid, that Jake was just a friend, and that I had no proof of anything. She called me crazy, said I was overreacting because I was insecure. That was the moment I realized she'd been lying to my face for months. She always had a way of twisting things, making me doubt myself, but the evidence was undeniable. That confrontation didn't go well. She yelled, called me controlling, insecure, and accused me of invading her privacy. She cried crocodile tears, acting like I was the one doing something wrong. But I wasn't stupid anymore. I knew the truth. She'd been screwing my best friend, planning to steal my inheritance, and trying to turn the tables so I'd be the bad guy. The betrayal cut so deep I felt like I was walking around in a fog. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I could think about was how she'd lied, cheated, and schemed right under my nose. Emotionally, I was a mess. I felt angry, so angry I could barely breathe. I felt hurt, like I'd been punched repeatedly in the chest. But mostly I felt betrayed. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, and she had thrown it all away. I wondered how I'd missed the signs, how I hadn't seen the cracks in our marriage. I thought about all the moments I'd trusted her, all the times I'd been vulnerable, only to find out she'd been planning her escape. It made me question everything. In the days that followed, I was a wreck. I didn't want to believe it was true, but the evidence was damning. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies. I started planning my next move, figuring out how to protect what was mine, our house, the estate, my family's legacy. I knew I had to act fast if I wanted to save what little dignity I had left. I also knew I couldn't let her get away with this, not without consequences. I wasn't just going to sit back and be the victim of her schemes. I had to fight back somehow. I'll admit I was scared. Scared of losing everything, scared of what she might do next, and scared of how broken I felt inside. But I also knew I couldn't let her win. I had to find a way to stop her from taking my inheritance, to expose her for what she really was, and to reclaim some sense of control. That's when I started to plan. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing: this wasn't over. not by a long shot. After I confronted Lisa that night, I knew I couldn't just let her keep scheming behind my back. The worst part was, I had no idea how deep her plans went. She'd been sneaking around for months, talking about our inheritance like it was some kind of prize she could claim if I was out of the picture. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train, completely blindsided, but now I was wide awake, and I realized I had to act fast. I started by digging into the financials. I had access to our joint accounts, and I wanted to see if she'd been siphoning money or planning something bigger. Sure enough, I noticed some suspicious transfers, small amounts moving into accounts I didn't recognize, mostly in her name. It was subtle at first, but I knew enough about finance to realize she was trying to hide something. I also remembered her mentioning how she'd been talking to a lawyer, and that raised even more red flags. One day, I decided to follow her. She claimed she was going out shopping, but I had a gut feeling she was up to something. I parked a few blocks away, watching her go into a fancy law firm downtown. That's when I overheard her talking to a lawyer. She was trying to get a legal separation, claiming I was emotionally abusive because I'd found out about her affair. She said I was ruining her life, and that she deserved the inheritance because I was holding her back. Hearing her say that, I knew she was dead serious about taking everything she could. I couldn't believe how far she'd gone. She was planning her escape, using the legal system to her advantage. That's when I remembered the estate my family left me. It was worth $500,000, and I knew she was trying to get her hands on it. I had to protect it, and I started talking to a lawyer myself. I wanted to know what my options were if she tried to steal it. Turns out, I had some legal ground, especially if I could prove her intentions were malicious, or if I could show she'd been planning to cheat me out of my inheritance. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior got worse. She was increasingly bitchy and manipulative, trying to turn everyone against me. She'd call me controlling or paranoid whenever I brought up her lying or her scheming. She even tried to gaslight me, saying I was paranoid and that I was imagining things. But I had proof, screenshots, bank statements, her own words, and I wasn't going to let her twist the truth. One night she went out to meet Jake again. I followed her just to see where she was heading. I caught her in a parking lot, kissing him passionately. The betrayal hit me all over again. I'd always known Jake was close to Lisa, but seeing them together like that so blatantly made me realize how far gone everything was. I felt like I was losing my mind. That's when I decided I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. In the days that followed, I set up a plan. I hired a private investigator to gather more evidence, photos, recordings, anything that could help my case. I also started documenting everything Lisa did, her calls, her meetings, her suspicious activities. I knew I had to be thorough if I wanted to stop her from stealing the estate and exposing her lies in court. What really pushed me over the edge was when she started talking openly about how she was going to take everything from me. She said she'd ruin me if I tried to stop her. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just cheating. She was actively trying to destroy me financially and emotionally. I felt a mix of rage and despair. How could someone I loved so much turn into this monster? How did I miss all the signs? I decided I'd fight fire with fire. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her walk away with my inheritance, my family's estate, and my dignity. I knew I had to take control of the situation before she snatched everything. I started preparing legal documents, drafting a plan to freeze the estate if she tried to claim it unlawfully. I also reached out to my family, who were just as shocked and furious once they found out what she'd been planning. They promised to support me and help protect what's ours. Every day felt like walking a tightrope. I was angry, hurt, and betrayed, but I also knew I had to stay calm and strategic. I couldn't let her manipulate me or turn the tables. My trust in her was shattered, and I was determined to get justice. The stakes were high: my marriage, my inheritance, and my reputation. I was already deep into this fight, and I knew I couldn't back down now. The next step was to confront her again, but this time I'd be ready. I was sick of her lies and schemes. It was time to put an end to this, once and for all. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Lisa was playing a game I hadn't even fully understood yet. She'd been so convincing with her lies, telling me she loved me, that I was overthinking, that I was insecure. She spun a web so tight I almost believed her. Almost. But I knew better now. Every secret she kept, every lie she told, was all part of her plan to take what wasn't hers, my inheritance, my family's estate, my life. One afternoon, I got a call from the private investigator I hired. Turns out, Lisa had been meeting with a lawyer, her lawyer, more than I had suspected. The investigator had caught her going into that law firm again, and this time she was carrying a thick folder. I couldn't see what was inside, but I knew it was bad. She was probably drafting papers, trying to figure out how to legally claim the estate, how to spin her lies into a convincing story. I felt a surge of anger. She wasn't just cheating. She was actively trying to steal everything I had. I decided I had to confront her again, but this time I'd do it with evidence in hand. I arranged a meeting at our house, pretending I wanted to talk about our future. But what I really wanted was to catch her in the act, or at least get her to slip up. When she arrived, she looked annoyed, like I was bothering her. She tried to act innocent, but I was ready. I laid out all the evidence I'd gathered, screenshots of her texts with Jake, the bank statements, the recordings from the investigator. Her face twisted into a mix of panic and fury. She started lying, of course. Said she didn't know what I was talking about, that I was paranoid, that I was trying to ruin her. Then she doubled down, blamed me for her emotional distress, claiming I was controlling her, that I was the one cheating and lying. I couldn't believe how fast she was spinning her stories. She even had the nerve to say she was the victim, that I was trying to ruin her reputation. I'd had enough. I told her I knew about her affair, about her plotting to steal the estate, and about her lies. Her reaction: she just scoffed, rolled her eyes, and accused me of trying to manipulate the situation. She said she was doing what's best for her, and that I was just jealous because she was more successful than me. That was the moment I realized she had no remorse, no shame, just a cold, calculated desire to get what she wanted. I felt a mix of disgust and sadness. This wasn't the woman I married. This was someone I didn't even recognize. I thought about all those nights I stayed up worrying about us, about her, and how she was planning her escape. I wondered how I'd missed the signs, how I'd been so blind to her true nature. But I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it, not without consequences. So I told her I was going to take legal action. I explained I'd file for a restraining order to keep her from draining our accounts or transferring the estate, and I'd start the process of divorce. Her face turned red, and she threw a tantrum, screaming and yelling about how I was ruining her life. She called me possessive, paranoid, and said I was crazy for even thinking she'd do something so horrible. But I didn't care anymore. I had proof, and I was finally taking control of the situation. That night I stayed up reading legal documents, trying to understand what I needed to do. I knew she'd try to fight me, try to twist everything around. She'd already started talking about how I was emotionally abusive and how I was trying to control her, to sway any legal sympathy her way. But I had witnesses, my family, the investigator, and the evidence I'd collected was solid. I was determined to protect what was mine and to stop her from walking away with everything. The next few days were a whirlwind. I contacted a lawyer, filed the necessary paperwork, and prepared for the court hearing. I knew she'd try to pull every dirty trick in the book, lying, fabricating stories, maybe even trying to accuse me of abuse again. But I was ready. I'd documented everything. I had the proof. I just wanted this nightmare to end. I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that I was finally taking a stand, but dread because I knew this was only the beginning of a long legal fight. And I also felt a deep sadness, because the woman I loved, the woman I married, was now just a stranger who'd betrayed me in every possible way. Still, I had to keep going. I owed it to myself, to my family, and to the future I wanted to protect from her. Greed and lies. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I'd worked so hard for. The court date came faster than I expected, and I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. Lisa showed up with her own lawyer, looking smug, like she already had the victory in the bag. She kept trying to play the victim, crying about how distressed she was, how I was controlling and abusive. and how she just wanted to start fresh. It was the same old act, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I had the evidence, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. During the hearing, Lisa's lawyer tried to spin her story, claiming I was emotionally abusive because I'd confronted her with proof of her affair and her plans to steal the estate. They argued I was trying to ruin her reputation, and that she deserved a fair share of the inheritance because she'd supposedly contributed to the marriage. Her lawyer also tried to claim that she was entitled to the estate because she was his wife, even though I had the legal documents and bank statements showing her scheming and secret meetings with. Lawyer, I was calm, but inside I was furious. I laid out the facts clearly, how she'd been cheating, lying, and plotting to steal our inheritance. I presented the evidence, screenshots, recordings, bank transfers, her own words. I told the court about her plans to get rid of me, how she'd been talking about draining our accounts and taking control of the estate. I explained that she'd been manipulative, controlling, and dishonest from the start, and that I was only fighting to protect what was mine. Lisa's reaction was classic. She started crying, claiming I was trying to control her, that I'd abused her emotionally, and that I'd been harassing her. She even tried to turn it around, saying I was the one cheating and lying. Her tears seemed fake and her voice cracked when she said she was scared, but I knew better. I'd seen her true colors now. This wasn't a woman who cared about us, it was a schemer, a manipulator, someone willing to hurt anyone to get what she wanted. The judge listened carefully, asking questions, reviewing the evidence I provided. After what felt like hours, the judge finally made a ruling. She ordered Lisa to stay away from the estate and to cease any attempts to transfer or claim the inheritance unlawfully. She also granted a temporary restraining order against Lisa, barring her from contacting me or draining our accounts. The judge made it clear that any attempt to steal the estate would be met with serious legal consequences. When I heard the verdict, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. It was a small victory, but I knew the fight wasn't over. Lisa was furious. She yelled, called the judge biased, and accused me of trying to ruin her life. She stormed out of the courtroom, screaming that she'd fight this all the way, and I knew she'd continue scheming behind the scenes. After the hearing, I met with my lawyer to discuss the next steps. We would file for divorce, of course, and I'd seek full custody of our assets, especially the estate. I also planned to take measures to freeze her access to any joint accounts and to secure the property. I wasn't going to let her get away with stealing my inheritance, no matter how much she tried to manipulate the system. The aftermath was a whirlwind. I was emotionally drained, but also relieved that I'd finally taken a stand. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, had turned into someone so ruthless and calculating. I wondered how I'd missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind to her true nature. But I also realized something. I'd been fooling myself into thinking I could fix this, that love could somehow fix her. Now I knew I had to protect myself and my future. My family was supportive, and they were just as angry as I was. They couldn't believe Lisa had been plotting all along. They urged me to stay strong, to not let her drag me down. I started to see that I'd been holding on to a dream that was never real, my marriage, my trust, my future with her. Now it was time to rebuild, time to move on, even if it felt like everything was falling apart. I also realized I'd learned a lot about myself. About resilience, about the importance of standing up for what's right, and about not ignoring the red flags. I'd been naive, but now I was smarter. I was going to let anyone manipulate me again. Not her, not anyone. The truth had come out, and I was determined to make sure it stayed out in the open. I needed to protect what was mine, and I wasn't going to let her take it without a fight. The days after the court ruling were a blur of paperwork, legal meetings, and trying to piece my life back together. I felt exhausted, emotionally drained from the roller coaster of betrayal, anger, and relief. Lisa's reaction hadn't been the end of it either. She kept trying to manipulate the situation, making false accusations, trying to paint herself as the victim, and even filing her own claims for emotional distress over the property I refused to give her during the divorce. I couldn't believe the audacity. She was so hell-bent on destroying me. She'd even turn her lies into a legal battle. I knew I had to stay one step ahead. I hired a new lawyer to handle her latest moves, and we started preparing for the worst. Lisa hired her own team of attorneys, trying to spin her version of the story, claiming I was abusive, controlling, and that her actions were justified because I had ruined her life. She insisted she'd been forced into a corner, that I was withholding her rightful share of the inheritance, and that I'd emotionally scarred her. It was classic gaslighting, and I could see right through her. Meanwhile, Lisa's bitchy attitude only intensified. She'd call me paranoid, possessive, and accuse me of harassment whenever I tried to clarify things or move forward. She'd scream on the phone, call me names, and even try to turn our friends and family against me. She'd tell anyone who'd listen that I was the villain, that I was trying to keep her from her rightful inheritance, and that I was mentally unstable. The more she lied, the more determined I became to shut her down once and for all. I also discovered that she'd been secretly meeting with a real estate agent, trying to sell off our family home. I found out because I had a friend who was checking in on her, just in case. The house was not just a property, it was part of my family's legacy. If she sold it, she'd get a hefty sum, money she'd definitely use to fund her escape. I immediately called my lawyer and we filed an injunction to stop any sale or transfer of the property. I couldn't let her get away with this. Everything was happening so fast. I was constantly on edge, waiting for her next move. I knew she was planning something, but I didn't know what exactly. I kept monitoring her social media, her conversations, and her meetings. I also started gathering evidence of her schemes, hidden bank accounts, suspicious transactions, even recordings of her talking about getting rid of me once she had the money. I didn't trust her one bit anymore. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt like I was fighting a ghost. The woman I loved turned out to be someone I barely recognized. Every day I wrestled with feelings of betrayal, anger, and sadness. I kept replaying the moments I missed the signs, the times I ignored her bitchy attitude or brushed off her manipulative comments. I'd trusted her, believed in us, and she'd been plotting behind my back. It felt like my entire world was crumbling. But I also learned something from all this chaos. I learned that I couldn't control her, but I could control how I responded. I started focusing on my own mental health, seeing a therapist, reconnecting with friends, and taking care of myself. I realized I'd been putting her needs above mine for too long, and that I needed to prioritize my happiness and safety. I also committed to making sure she didn't get away with her schemes, no matter how much she lied or manipulated. One night I sat alone in my house, thinking about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the legal battles. I felt a mix of anger and cold determination. I knew I'd come out of this stronger, even if it didn't feel like it now. I had to keep fighting, not just for the estate, but for my own peace of mind. I promised myself I'd never let anyone manipulate me like this again. I'd rebuild my life, piece by piece, and make sure her schemes didn't succeed. Looking back, I realize I've learned some hard lessons. Trust is fragile, and sometimes the person closest to you can turn into your worst enemy. But I also learned that standing up for yourself, even when it feels hopeless, is the only way to survive. Lisa's greed and lies almost destroyed me, but I refuse to let her win. I will fight for what's rightfully mine, and I'll keep rebuilding my life, stronger and wiser than before. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything, I realize how much this ordeal has changed me. I used to think love was enough: trust, loyalty, honesty. Turns out I was naive. Lisa's betrayal shattered all of that, but it also opened my eyes. I see now that the most important thing is protecting yourself, your assets, your dignity, your peace of mind. I learned that sometimes the people closest to you can be the ones who hurt you the most, and you have to be prepared to fight for what's yours. The legal battles, the lies, the emotional roller coaster, none of it was easy, but I came out of it stronger. I learned to trust my instincts, to listen to that little voice that warns you when something's wrong. I also learned that revenge isn't about petty payback. It's about standing your ground, making sure justice is served, and not letting anyone manipulate or destroy you. I had to be strategic, patient, and relentless. And in the end, I succeeded in protecting what mattered most: my inheritance, my family's estate, and my own sanity. What I want anyone reading this to know is this: don't ignore the red flags. Don't dismiss your gut feelings. If you suspect someone is lying or scheming, don't brush it off. Dig deeper. Gather evidence. Stand up for yourself even if it feels uncomfortable. Because once trust is broken, it's very hard to rebuild, and sometimes the only way forward is to cut ties completely. I also want to say that healing takes time. I still feel the sting of betrayal, but I'm learning to move past it. I've started focusing on my future, building new relationships, investing in myself, and creating a life that's true to who I am now. Lisa may have tried to ruin me, but I refuse to let her define my story. I'm stronger than her schemes, and I'm finally free from her shadow. So, to anyone out there going through something similar, stay vigilant, stay strong. Protect yourself and your assets. Don't let anyone manipulate your love or trust. And remember, even in the darkest moments, there's a way out. You just have to be brave enough to find it. I've learned that firsthand. And I'm finally at peace, knowing I fought for my future and came out on the other side.